Heading into year 4 for Cade Cunningham, this is the year he has to take a big step forward, and I have a checklist for what needs to be accomplished, what he should feel like he has to accomplish this upcoming season for the Detroit Pistons. We'll talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So I want to apologize real quickly that I did not have an episode on Friday. We are posting this episode on Saturday, so a day late. We are back to 5 days a week, but I did have a family emergency that had me away for the entire day. So I apologize for that. But moving forward, we are back to 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So season's coming back up. Really excited. Training camp coming up soon. Preseason less than a few weeks away. So it's going to be a fun season. Can't wait for it. But in today's episode, I want to talk with you guys about, real quickly, we almost forgot to tell you guys, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. You'll hear more about them a little bit later. All right, so in today's episode, I want to talk about Cade Cunningham and what should be his checklist coming into this season. Now, what really inspired this episode was I was scrolling Twitter a few days ago, and I saw some really smart people that I respect that do a lot of basketball writing, and they dug something up from a few years ago, back, I believe, 2019, 2020. And they were predicting who would be the top 30 players in 5 years from now. And on that list, so they were basically saying in 2025, and on that list, they had Cade 7th. They thought Cade would be the 7th best player. Now, it's it was, again, some people I respect, but it wasn't like some big ESPN thing or anything. But I just looked at it, and I was like, damn, hopes were really high for Cade. Cade was extremely highly touted coming out of college, going into the NBA draft, just the surefire number 1 overall pick. And now 4 years later, he obviously dealt with injuries his second year, missed the majority of that. The Pistons moved on from their general manager. They've moved on to now their third head coach during that time frame. They've moved on from some lottery picks. They've made a few trades. Things have not gone well. Not just, I would say Cade probably would say things haven't went the greatest for his individual performance to start his career, but also obviously things have not gone well at all for the Detroit Pistons starting the building around Cade Cunningham the first 4 years or the first 3 years of his career. So heading into his 4th year, I decided to make a checklist of what Cade, not the Pistons, not what the Pistons believe should be his checklist, but if I was Cade Cunningham, I'm the former number 1 overall pick. I was this highly touted. I think this highly of myself. I put in this much work this offseason. I played as well as I did last year. Coming into this year, 4th year, this is what I would have as my checklist if I was Cade Cunningham, and that's all we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So if you guys have some things you guys think that Cade should have on his goals or list of goals that he should be checking off this upcoming season, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kook Hill. But first up, I think the very first one, and there's a few I have obviously, but the very first one is make the All-Star team. Cade is heading into his 4th year. He is 22 years old. He's going to be 23 by the time the season starts. He actually turns 23 in a few days here. So happy early birthday to Cade. He's going to be 23 in a few days here. He's only played 138 games. He hasn't even played 2 seasons worth of games yet. So it really is really early in his career still. Despite that, after what I just said to opening up what inspired this episode, there was very high expectations for Cade, and I still have very high expectations for Cade. But right after signing the contract that he did this past offseason, time is not only ticking on the Pistons to build a team around Cade, but time is really ticking on Cade as well to really show everybody I'm worth this contract, and I am that prospect that everyone thought I was coming out of college. And the first thing I think that he could do to really push that forward is make the All-Star team this upcoming year. Now, his numbers this past season were 22.7 points a game, 7.5 assists, 87% from the free throw line, 35% from 3, 45% from the field, and 87% from the free throw line. I bring those numbers up to say this. If the Pistons were a good team this past year, if the Pistons were a play-in team at least, he maybe makes the All-Star game. And the reason why I say that is if you look at another former or an All-Star from this past season, that's right around the same age as Cade, put up basically the exact same numbers as Cade. And that is Paolo Banchero. Now, Paolo Banchero is also really good. This is not an attempt to downplay Paolo. Paolo is really good. But Paolo this past year averaged 22.6 points a game, 5.4 assists, 6.9 rebounds, shot 45% from the field, 34% from deep, and 72% from the free throw line. Something we'll mention later in Cade's checklist along, it's going to be something about his efficiency. But if you look at both of their efficiency from the field this past year, Cade had a 54.6 true shooting percentage this past year. Guess what Paolo had? A 54.6 true shooting percentage this past year. So why is Paolo talked about the way he is? Why is Paolo making all-star teams? Why is he talked about the way he is heading into this offseason, heading into this new season, and Cade isn't? Well, it's pretty simple. Paolo was on a really good team in the Orlando Magic. They have a lot of really good pieces around him, a really good defensive team, and Cade played on the Pistons, and it was the worst season in Pistons history. So people didn't really pay attention to what Cade did this past year. And I'm not arguing that he should have made the All-Star team. He definitely shouldn't have. You can't make the All-Star team when you're playing that bad. The team's playing that bad. My point is that I don't think Cade is really that far away from an All-Star player right now. I think he's basically at the same level as Paolo. They are basically the same level of players right now. And I know Cade feels that way. I know Cade feels like he's the level of an all-star player. So why not? The very first goal for this upcoming season, for your fourth season in the NBA, is to secure that NBA all-star berth in the Eastern Conference. I think that's something that's easily on the board for him. I think he definitely should accomplish that this year. I think that should be number one on his list of goals. Obviously, outside of team success, no one's saying that he shouldn't care about team success. I think we all get that. But on the top of his personal goals, I think should be to make the all-star team. And these are the teams that, you're dealing with in the Eastern Conference with their guards. You got obviously Jalen Brunson in New York. You got Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland in Cleveland. You're dealing with Tyrese Halliburton in Indiana, dealing with Tyrese Maxey in Philadelphia. You obviously got Jimmy Butler in Miami. You got Trae Young in Atlanta. You got LaMelo Ball in Charlotte. That's the company that Cade's going to be fighting against. And do I think Cade can be at the top of that class in the East this upcoming year? I do. I do think he can be that. And we'll dive further into that a little later when we go further into his checklist this upcoming year. But along with making the All-Star team, that leads you into what I believe should be the second thing on Cade's checklist this upcoming year, and that is to get the Pistons into the play-in tournament. Now, for those of you guys who've been listening to the podcast, you know that I'm not the highest person on this current roster. Do I think this roster is better than this past year they had? Absolutely. It's 100% better than last year. But is it good enough to launch the Pistons from the 14 wins they were at to a play-in team in the Eastern Conference this upcoming year? A play-in team this past year had 36 wins. So that would be 22 plus wins over the past year. You don't see that happen very often. So do I think the team has improved that much in one offseason? I personally don't. However, I'm not Cade. And Cade should be looking at this upcoming year as, I'm going to be good enough to lead this team to the play-in. And if I want to be in the All-Star conversation, if I want to get this respect nationally that I deserve, if I want to get this respect that my play deserves, that my talent deserves, I have to lead this team to wins. Whether that's fair or not, that is the narrative. That is how the NBA goes. If you're putting up stats and you're losing, you're a stat patter. If you're putting up stats and you're losing, you put up empty stats. I mean, that's what your narrative. That's what your what people are going to know you as, and that's just is what it is. That's the day that we're in 2024 in the coverage of the NBA. So if Cade wants his respect, and he wants to make that All-Star team, and he wants that national respect, and he wants to be known as living up to that contract, he needs to push the Pistons to the play-in this upcoming year, or at least fighting for the play-in. But that should be his goal, to get the Pistons to the play-in. And I'll wrap up this segment with this before we move on to the rest of the checklist that I have for Cade this upcoming year. I'll say this. As good as I think Cade is, and as good as I think Cade can be this upcoming year, again, we'll dive into that a little further, a little bit later. if he is actually that good, he should be able to fill in the holes that this team has. He should be able to lift this team to a point where they are at least competing for the play-in. Maybe they don't make it, but they should be playing. If Cade is as good as I am, unless everyone else, I don't want to say it's impossible, because maybe the rest of the team truly just falls off a cliff and no one improves, and it's like last year. I don't think anyone foresees that happening. I think this roster is going to be better. So if we are going to assume that this roster is better and the players they brought in do exactly what they've been throughout their careers, if Cade is as good as I think he will be this upcoming year, he should be able to have the Pistons playing meaningful games in March. And does that mean playing meaningful games as in making a top 6 seed? No. But the Pistons should be playing meaningful games in March where they're trying to get to that 10th seed. Maybe they don't get there, but they should be playing those meaningful games if Cade is as good as I think he will be this upcoming year. So first 2 things on his checklist: make the All-Star team, and a way to make the All-Star team should be number 2 on his list: push the Pistons into the play-in. So let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at @KukaHill. Do you guys think these are fair checklists, fair goals for Cade to have this upcoming year? And if you have different goals, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at @KukaHill. When we come back, I know I referenced Cade's efficiency earlier, and while it was similar to that of Apollo Banchero, it's nowhere near good enough, and there's a specific area of his game that he has to improve to become a much more efficient player. You've heard us talk about FanDuel a ton on this podcast, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 to get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. If you're into fantasy football like I am, you're not just drafting your hometown teams because you're actually trying to win and not just being a homer, you need to be able to watch the players out of market. And this is a perfect thing for you. Again, now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, that's another great way to support the podcast. So in order for Cade to make the All-Star team, in order for Cade to get the Pistons to the play-in, what Cade needs to be able to do, or needs to improve on, he has to become a much more efficient basketball player. Now, I wouldn't say this past year he was an incredibly inefficient basketball player. First 2 years of his career, 100%. He was very inefficient. First year, he was 50.4 true shooting percentage, well below league average, but that was his rookie year. Second year, he only played 12 games, so I don't think anyone really holds that against him at all. But he was at 49.2 true shooting percentage his second year. Now, heading into his third year, or heading into his fourth year, I should say, he's coming off a season when he had a 54.6 true shooting percentage. So that's a big improvement over his first year in the NBA, nearly 5%. He got much more efficient. He was shooting the mid-range really well, and he was shooting the 3 ball a lot closer to what people expected him coming out of college at 35.5% on 5.4 attempts. Now, league average true shooting percentage, according to basketballreference.com, was at 58% this past year. Now, that's not filtering out guys who take the amount of shots Cade does. That's just everyone in the NBA true shooting percentage. What's the average? I'm sure if you filtered it out to guys that took the amount of shots that Cade is, like guys who at least took 15 shots a game, what was the true shooting percentage? Like, I'm sure it probably, my assumption's going to be, I could do more research into that. I don't know how to get that stat, how to find that, but I'm sure I could find it somewhere out. If I do, I'll bring it up in another episode. But my assumption based off watching the NBA is if you filtered that to guys who shot at least 15 times a game, the league average would probably drop to around, I'd say 57, 56%. That would be my assumption. So I'd say Cade was probably like right around slightly below league average efficiency according to his volume and his position. And if he wants to become an all-star and he wants to lead the team to the play and he wants to become worth that contract, he has to become a much more efficient basketball player. And the way he does that is pretty simple. continue to shoot what he's shooting from the three-point line, even better. Continue to improve around there. But around just about 36% from three probably is good enough. You'd like it to be a little bit higher. I think Cade can get it to around 38%, but 36% on good volume, that's not bad at all. I think that's fine. Around 45% from the field, that's not terribly bad either. Like, you'd like to see it get up closer to around 47%, but that's not too bad, to be honest. Well, a way that he improves that is his finishing around the rim. I don't think it's his three-point shot that needs vastly improvements this upcoming year. If he gets better from beyond the arc and takes more threes, I'd love that. I'd like to see him take more off the dribble threes like he did at Oklahoma State. I actually was just talking with someone close. I was just talking to someone close to the Pistons about this, and they mentioned that's something you should see from him this upcoming year. Some more off the dribble threes this upcoming year. So stay tuned for that. But he needs to improve his finishing around the rim 100%. It's the weakest part of his offensive game right now. And I do think some of it comes from the fact that he doesn't have a lot of spacing. Because if you look at like B-Ball Index and their gradings of finishers in their second, third years, Cade's always ranked towards the high end of that because of the degree of difficulty of his finishes. Now, the question that people need to answer, and Cade, I'm sure, is trying to solve this upcoming year, and the Pistons are trying to solve, is the level of difficulty Cade's finishes, are they that high? Are they that hard? Tough finishes around the rim? Is it because spacing's so bad and guys are helping because they don't feel like they have to respect shooters on the team? I'm sure part of that is in the equation. But how much of it is because of Cade's lack of separation, lack of explosion at the rim, his ability to get cleaner shots at the rim and turn tough finishes into free throws? They need to figure that out. But that is the part of his game that he has to improve on. He absolutely has to turn a lot of these attempts at the rim into free throws. That's another part that will really take his game to the next part, or the next step of his game, if he wants to become that top level basketball player. 4.4 free throw attempts a game this past year. That's higher than it was, but that's not good enough. You'd like to see that around 6 attempts, to be honest, with how much Cade has the ball in his hands. And he's a really good free throw shooter as well. If he just turns some of those attempts at the rim into free throws, he becomes a highly efficient, much more efficient basketball player. And he's easily getting closer to 25 plus points per game on the season. If he can just get more free throws per game, get easier finishes around the rim, and eliminate a lot of those tough finishes around the rim or these tough attempts, I should say, that he takes around the rim as well. So with the Pistons addressing the spacing like it seems like they have in Malik Beasley, in Tobias Harris, in Tim Hardaway Jr., and bringing back Simone Fontecchio for a full season, and depending on what lineup that they put around him, they have the flexibility to put those type of lineups around him this upcoming year. He should have spacing. He should have clear driving lanes, and I would assume guys wouldn't be rotating and tagging so hard at the rim if they have to guard or Simone Fontecchio in the corner, or a Tobias, or a Malik Beasley, all that kind of stuff. So you should have clear driving lanes. The rest of it, getting cleaner looks, getting better separation, converting, turning a lot of those attempts into free throws, that's all on Cade. And there's another aspect of Cade's game that I've been told that he really spent a lot of work on this offseason, which I do think, if it actually comes to utilization for this upcoming year, will be big time for him. And I know that he's been working on is his floater. He's been working on his floating game to try to get, if guys are waiting for him at the rim, instead of going all the way into the chest, maybe not getting that foul call and taking a tougher finish, just stopping and taking that 5-foot floater. That was something that he was not that good at this past season as well. That's something that he just hasn't been as good at throughout his NBA career. Now, if he can add that to his game, he is really I'd say right now what Cade's missing in his offensive game to really just make him like an unstoppable, high-level offensive engine is his finishing around the rim and floaters. He has to be able to hit some floaters, and he has to be able to finish around the rim. This past season, he ranked in the 36th percentile on runners. That was just around average, but only on 84 possessions. Not many attempts with that. And also around the rim this past year, he just was not a very good finisher. He was in the 14th percentile this past year. So with improved spacing and the amount of work I know he's put in on explosion, along with how much work I know he's put in on his floater, that will really help his efficiency. make him a much better offensive player, and will lead across the board to him trying to make the All-Star team and the Pistons making the play in this upcoming season. But he has to improve. He has to improve his efficiency, and the way he does that, become a better finisher around the rim, turn a lot of those shots at the rim into free throws. Simple as that. It's easier said than done, obviously, but I know it's something that he's aware of. I know it's something his camp is aware of, and I know it's something he's been working on, which is why I'm really high on his upcoming season, because he was aware of what he needs to work on, and he's been working on it all season. I can tell you guys that much. So I'm really excited for this upcoming year. I think he can accomplish that. I think he will become more efficient, because I also think he'll take more threes this year. I think he will shoot better from three this upcoming year, just like he did from his second year to his third year. But I'm excited for it, but he has to do it. He absolutely has to do it coming into this year, and we'll see if he does. But let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at @KukaHill. Do you guys agree with what he needs to add to his game to become a more efficient player? How do you think he should go about doing it? And do you believe he will become a more efficient player this upcoming year? Coming up, we'll finish off with what I believe is the last of Cade Cunningham's checklist, and I'm putting the bar extremely high with this final goal for him in his fourth season. It's extremely high, but for a former #1 overall pick, for a player that thinks as highly of himself as Cade Cunningham does, it's a bar that I think he's willing to try go after. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So this final, it's not, I have a few like tiny checklists, but it all leads to this big goal on his checklist. I want to say this just real quickly before I say what this goal is, because when I say this goal, people are going to be like, "Cool, that's not fair. You can't do that." I'm going to do it anyways, but I want to just make this clear. Cade was a former #1 overall pick. The amount of hype around Cade coming out of college was unreal. People think extremely high of Cade, and I know nationally that buzz has kind of quieted down a little bit. I don't think much to like Cade's play, more so about the Pistons situation. But just because nationally people have quieted down on Cade and people aren't talking about him as much, and because the Pistons have been bad at building around him, doesn't mean that you should change your pre-draft feelings on Cade based on how he's played. This past year, how well he played with the situation he was with, I don't know how you like leave the season lower on him than you were pre-draft. And if you were pre-draft as high on him as it seemed like the entire NBA community was, I don't know how you would think that this is like unacceptable or unfair goal for him to have heading into year 4. If you told someone 4 years ago, heading into year 4, this is a goal for Cade Cunningham, they would be like, oh yeah, for 100%, he should be able to get it. Like that's where they would have been. And 4 years later, at least in my opinion, I don't think people would be moving off that or should be moving off that because of how Cade's played. I think the only reason why people would be moving off this is because of how the Pistons have built around him and it hasn't translated to wins. I think Cade's play this past year warrants that he feels like he could do this. Enough teasing for it. I think Cade's final goal, make the All-NBA team. And I'm going out and I'm saying this right now. Look, people say that I'm high on Cade and they want me to come out and just say how high I feel about Cade. Like what's my level of belief in Cade? How good do I think Cade's going to be? Because I guess that people feel like I've kind of hit around the bushes and haven't really said straight up. Well, I'm telling you right now, I think Cade should be an All-NBA third-team member this upcoming year. That's how good I think Cade can be this upcoming year. Now, I will say this. I think Cade's going to be a much better defender this upcoming year because they're going to have a defensive coach and they're going to be a more competitive team. I think you saw his rookie year, he's going to be a good defender. I think a lot of people felt that way after his rookie year. Then the second season happened. He was hurt, missed the whole year. Then this past year was so bad that everyone just stopped playing defense. He had so much pressure on him offensively that he lacked on the defensive end. Is that an excuse? No, you should be still trying on defense. But I think everyone in the NBA community, anytime there's a player in that type of position that it has good defensive tools and has showcased his ability to play defense before, says, yeah, they didn't play good defense this past year. They should be criticized for that. But if they didn't have the offensive load and they were more competitive, like you'll easily be able to see him be a good defender in that situation. I think everyone probably feels that way. Once you get Cade in that situation, he will be a good defender. So I think he'll be a better defender on that on the defensive side of the floor, which will make him a more valuable player on all the impact stats, on net rating, on how well the team plays this upcoming year. So I think that's number one. Number two, the amount of improvement we saw him in his game this past year. He remains one of the best mid-range shooters, especially off the dribble in the NBA. He improved his three ball vastly this upcoming year, or this past year. He's a dynamic pick and roll player in the NBA without spacing this past year, despite not having space, despite the fact that people were playing hard at the nail. If you don't know what the nail is, let's say, for example, Cade's coming around a pick and roll at the right wing. He's coming around to his left, and he has a player on the left wing. That defender is pinching down at Cade. That's the nail. If you're playing aggressive at the nail, you're really pushed all the way over to the pick and roll, trying to take away that driving lane because you're not worried about that kick out to the wing. And that's something that Cade dealt with a lot this past year. Defenders playing extremely hard at the nail. And despite that, he was one of the best pick and roll players on that type of volume that he had this past year in the NBA. So I think you've seen those type of improvements. He averaged 7.5 assists per game this past year. He's a really good passer. And as the season went on, the turnovers that everyone likes to harp on, I mean, James Edwards III kind of talked about this, I think, in this last episode that we had with him. Actually, no, it wasn't James. I'm sorry. It wasn't James. It was oh my God, Dan Travelli. When we had him on the podcast a few episodes ago, he spoke about how everyone likes to talk about Cade's turnovers, but after the first 10 or so games, he really cut those turnovers down. I believe he was averaging around 2.9 turnovers a game after that. So he cut down his turnovers and was remaining a good playmaker despite the fact of what he had around him. So the fact that he was able to do those things, despite what he had around him, I feel incredibly good about this. I just looked at it. Outside the first 10 games of the season, or first 12 games of the year. After that, he averaged 3.0 turnovers a game. The first 10 games, he was averaging around like 4.8 turnovers a game. It was ridiculous. So he really learned as the season went on to be more careful with the ball, to cut down on turnovers, remained an incredible playmaker, remained an incredible pick and roll player, remained an incredible pull-up mid-range shooter, became a much better three-point shooter in this same stretch I just talked about. Outside the first 12 games, he shot 37% from three, which is where he probably would like to be at for an entire season. So we see him improve from beyond the arc. We see him improve with turnovers. We see him improve as a playmaker. I think a lot of people expect him to be a good defender this year. So he's going to be a two-way player. And if he improves at finishing around the rim, like I believe he will, and I know for a fact that he's been working on his explosion to get more explosive like people felt he was in college. He's working on getting that explosiveness back. And if he's working on adding that floater back to his game, heading into the fourth year of Cade, you should have that level of belief in him because of what he showed in his third year and because of how people felt about him pre-draft. 4 years into his career, people would have been saying he's an All-NBA player. What's changed? The Pistons situation? He hasn't gotten worse as a player. This past year, I would say, was incredibly impressive with what he was going through and what he had around him. What would make you fall off of this opinion or off this expectation for him? The one thing, team success. And I will give you that. I will give you that. And I do not think, like I've said, I'm sorry, I just hit my camera. Like I've said, I'm not incredibly high on this team's roster. I don't think this roster is exceptional. I don't think it's like this great improvement. Do I think it's better? Yes. I don't think it's incredibly, better than this past season. However, like I said earlier, if Cade is going to be as good as I think he is, he has a chance. It's not 100%. You still need help. But he should be giving the Pistons a chance at being a play-in team. And if they can just squeeze into the play-in, if that happens, if he's able to get this team to the play-in, and if he has help from his teammates, if he sees improvements from Jaden Ivey, from Jalen Duren, from Asar Thompson, and they're able to push for the play-in and just squeeze in, even at the 10th seed, let's see how he plays in the play-in. If they get to the play-in, let's see how Cade does with the lights on in play-in. Because if he plays well in that play-in, let's say they get there, he gets them there, improvement around the team helps them, they get to the play-in, and he plays well in that play-in and gets the Pistons to an 8th seed, he should be, I think he'll be in conversation for the All-NBA third team. And along with that, I guess a more simpler way of saying this, I think Cade will just be better than all these guys this upcoming year. I think he's just a better player. I think he'll just be a better player than a lot of these guys who have made All-NBA over the last few years. For example, this past year, All-NBA third team, Devin Booker, Stephen Curry, Tyrese Halliburton, LeBron, and Domantas Sabonis. On the second team, Jalen Brunson, Anthony Davis, KD, Anthony Edwards, Kawhi Leonard. Let's go to the previous season. All-NBA third team was Julius Randle, LeBron, Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, and Damian Lillard. I'll go out there and say it right now. I think Cade should be better than Damian Lillard this upcoming year. I think he should be better than Sabonis this upcoming year. I think he should be better than Julius Randle this upcoming year. I think he should be better than Tyrese Halliburton this upcoming year. I think that's how good Cade should be this upcoming year. That's how high I am on Cade this upcoming year. So we'll see if he's able to do it. I think that's something that he should have on his checklist. Now, again, this last one, this All-NBA one, that's a very high bar we just put. It's the highest of bars you could probably give him in his fourth year. So it's going to be insanely hard for him to reach it. It is. But with the first overall pick, with how incredibly high people thought about him, with how high I feel about him, you have to put that up there. You have to put that goal on the board. And is it the end of the world if he doesn't reach that goal? No, it's not the end of the world. If he gets close, if he improves and all the other things we've talked about, I think everyone's still going to feel just as good about him. But I do think Cade at home right now or in the practice facility where he's training, do I think that Cade's thinking in his mind, I can be All-NBA this year. I'm that good of a basketball player. The amount of work I've put in this past year and all my weaknesses, I feel like I can be an All-NBA player this year. I do think he's thinking that. I think he has every right to feel that way. If his team improves and he's able to lead them some wins and he gets some help from Jaden Ivey, he gets some help from Jalen Duren, he gets some help from Asar Thompson, he gets some help from this new roster they brought in, this new coaching staff that he brought in, that Trajan brought in. If he gets some help and they can improve as a team, win-loss wise, you'll see him in that conversation. Mind you, again, I'll leave you off with this. Paolo Banchero got a lot of votes for that third team, and they basically resembled the same stats this past year. Why is that? Because Orlando had a good team, they had good players around them, and they made the playoffs. If these guys are able to improve and give him that help, and they are able to be just simply a competitive team, I think that really does a lot for him when it comes to this. So Cade should have that on his list. We'll see if he's able to accomplish it. So that's my checklist for Cade Cunningham this upcoming season. You guys want to know how I feel about Cade? There you go. I've given it to you guys. That's what I think he should be checking off this upcoming year, and he should be able to check mark each and every single one of those if he's going to be the player I think he can become. So let me know in the comment section down below. Do you guys think I'm being fair, unfair? Do you think he can accomplish these goals that I've set for him this upcoming year? Again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at @KookHill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on my podcast platforms. I'm sorry about not posting on Friday. Again, I had a family emergency, so I hope you guys are okay with the Saturday episode here. We're back to 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. A last little nugget for you guys. I've been streaming a lot over on Twitch at KookHill7. I like to play a lot of Madden. I like to play a lot of video games. So if you guys want to come check out the stream, hang out, talk Pistons with me, just chill with me while I go through and play these competitive games. I only play competitively. So if you guys want to just come chill with me and talk Pistons or just talk games or talk life, you guys can follow me over there at Twitch, KookHill7. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for your support. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. And until next time, peace out.